The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Eleanor Whitcomb's townhouse in Canterbury. She sat at the oak dining table with a cup of tea, her son Oliver quietly buttering his toast across from her. Since the sudden death of her husband, Richard, 3 months earlier, their days had followed a rhythm of silence and gentle routine. But that morning was different. A thick envelope, sealed in deep red wax, had been slipped through the door. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was Richard's. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, she found a letter addressed to her, written in Richard's familiar script. The words chilled her blood. He apologized for secrets he had kept, and confessed that years ago he had fathered a child outside their marriage. In the letter, he explained that a separate will had been drawn up, naming this unknown child as a beneficiary of his estate. Eleanor's heart raced. She could not breathe. She looked up at Oliver, who was staring at her with wide, questioning eyes. She quickly folded the letter, hiding it from him. As she steadied herself, the doorbell rang. Standing on the doorstep was a woman she had not seen in over a decade, her former closest friend, Beatrice, dressed in an elegant grey coat and carrying a leather briefcase. "Eleanor," Beatrice said softly, almost too sweetly. "I heard about Richard's passing. I think we need to talk." Eleanor's grip on the letter tightened. Her world, once stable, had begun to tilt into something darker. Eleanor stood frozen, staring at Beatrice as though she were a ghost from another life. Memories of their friendship came rushing back, afternoons in the garden, whispered confidences over wine, and the bitter quarrel that had driven them apart all those years ago. "May I come in?" Beatrice asked, her smile composed yet her eyes sharp, as if she already knew too much. Reluctantly, Eleanor stepped aside. Beatrice entered the hallway, her heels clicking against the polished wooden floor. Oliver peeked through the doorway, curiosity written across his young face. "You must be Oliver," Beatrice said warmly, crouching slightly to his level. "My, how you've grown. You look so much like your father." Eleanor's chest tightened at the words. She quickly sent Oliver upstairs, telling him to fetch his schoolbooks. Once he was gone, Beatrice placed her briefcase on the table and leaned closer. "There are things you need to know," she began smoothly. "Richard trusted me with matters he could not bring himself to share with you. He made arrangements for a child. A child who deserves a portion of what he left behind." Eleanor's blood turned cold. Beatrice's voice was too confident, too rehearsed. It was as if she had been waiting for this very moment. "How do you know about the child?" Eleanor asked sharply, her hand brushing against the hidden letter in her pocket. Beatrice's lips curved into a smile. "Because I was the one who helped Richard draft the documents. And now, Eleanor, those documents are in my possession." The words struck like thunder. Eleanor realized at once, Beatrice had not returned as a friend. She had returned with power, and with a plan. Eleanor's pulse hammered in her ears as she stared at Beatrice. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with an invisible weight. "You expect me to believe this?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling yet sharp. Beatrice calmly opened her briefcase and slid out a bundle of papers, neatly bound with a red ribbon. "These are copies," she explained, her tone smooth as silk. "The originals are kept safely with a solicitor I trust. They confirm that Richard named another heir, and without a challenge, the estate must be divided." Eleanor reached for the papers but Beatrice pulled them back slightly, her smile cold. "Not so fast. You see, Eleanor, I am willing to help you through this unpleasant matter. But I will require cooperation and discretion." The implication was clear. Beatrice wanted control. Eleanor's mind raced. She had the letter from Richard, a confession of sorts, yet it was vague and incomplete. Without more evidence, Beatrice's documents would carry the greater weight in court. At that moment, Oliver's footsteps echoed down the staircase. He entered the room clutching his schoolbag, unaware of the storm brewing between the two women. Eleanor forced a calm smile. "Off you go, darling," she said softly, brushing his hair aside. "I will join you at the school gates later." Once Oliver was gone, Eleanor turned back to Beatrice. "What exactly do you want?" she demanded. Beatrice leaned closer, her perfume lingering in the air. "Half of everything. Money, property, assets. If you resist, the truth will come out, and you may lose it all." Eleanor's stomach twisted. Beatrice was not just holding documents. She was holding a noose, tightening it with every word. But deep inside, Eleanor felt a flicker of defiance. She would not let Beatrice destroy the life she had fought to protect. And as Beatrice left the house with that same cold smile, Eleanor whispered to herself, "If she has proof, then I must find the truth." That evening, Eleanor sat alone in Richard's study, the fire in the grate reduced to glowing embers. The letter from her late husband lay unfolded on the desk before her, its inked words haunting her eyes. She traced the handwriting with trembling fingers, searching for any clue that might lead her to the truth. The sound of the old grandfather clock ticked loudly in the silence. Richard had always kept this room locked, claiming it was where he handled business matters. Now Eleanor wondered what else he had been hiding. She rose from the chair and began to search. Drawer after drawer revealed neat files, bills, and correspondence, but nothing unusual. Just as she was about to give up, her fingers brushed against a false panel inside the lower cabinet. With a firm push, it gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small stack of documents tied with twine, along with a faded photograph. Eleanor's breath caught. The picture showed Richard, much younger, standing with a woman she did not recognize. In his arms was a child, no more than 2 years old. Her heart pounded as she examined the papers. They were bank statements, secret transfers to an account she had never seen. The money had been withdrawn regularly, over many years. Eleanor sank back into the chair, the photograph trembling in her hand. The child in Richard's arms, was this the other heir? If so, who was the mother? And where were they now? The floor creaked suddenly behind her. She spun around, clutching the papers. Oliver stood in the doorway, his eyes wide. "Mum," he whispered, "why are you crying?" Eleanor quickly wiped her tears, forcing a smile. But inside, her resolve hardened. She knew she could not trust Beatrice. She would have to uncover the truth herself, no matter what it cost. The next morning, Eleanor walked briskly through the cobbled streets of Canterbury, her scarf pulled tightly against the chill. The photograph and hidden bank statements were tucked safely inside her handbag. She knew she had to confront the matter before Beatrice tightened her grip any further. Her destination was the office of Mr. Jonathan Harwood, the family solicitor who had managed Richard's affairs for years. The brass plaque outside gleamed in the pale light, and as she pushed open the heavy door, the smell of leather and old paper greeted her. "Mrs. Whitcomb," Harwood said with a polite bow of his head. "I had not expected to see you today. How may I assist?" Eleanor fixed him with a steady gaze. "I believe my husband kept things from me. I need to see all documents relating to his estate. Every will, every amendment." For a moment, Harwood hesitated. His fingers tapped lightly on the desk. "Mrs. Whitcomb, certain files are confidential. Unless there is a court order." Eleanor cut him off sharply. "Confidential? Richard was my husband. I have the right to know if he betrayed our family." Harwood's expression flickered, and slowly, he rose to unlock a cabinet. From within, he retrieved a slim folder bound in blue. "There is another will," he admitted quietly. "One that names a second beneficiary. I advised Richard against it, but he insisted." Eleanor's breath caught. Her hands shook as she reached for the folder. Inside lay a signed document, bearing Richard's unmistakable signature, and a name she had never seen before, Samuel Harland. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Who was Samuel Harland? Could this be the child from the photograph? Before she could ask further, Harwood leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Be careful, Mrs. Whitcomb. You are not the only one searching for him. And those who are, do not wish you well. Eleanor froze. If Beatrice was involved, this was no longer just about inheritance. It was a game of power and danger. The streets of Canterbury grew darker as evening settled in, the lamps flickering to life one by one. Eleanor clutched her handbag tightly, Harwood's warning echoing in her mind. She hurried through the narrow lanes, determined to return home before Oliver noticed her absence. But as she turned a corner near the cathedral, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was a tall man in a long coat, his hat pulled low to hide his face. Mrs. Whitcomb. His voice was deep, steady. Eleanor froze. Who are you? The man extended a folded note. You're looking for Samuel Harland. If you want answers, come to the old mill on the outskirts tomorrow night. Alone. Before she could reply, the stranger vanished into the darkness, leaving her trembling in the cold air. She opened the note with shaky hands. Scrawled across it in hurried ink was one word, beware. Eleanor's heart raced as she hurried back to her house. Every sound on the street seemed sharper, every step behind her too close. She locked the door quickly once inside, pressing her back against it. Oliver came running down the stairs, smiling. Mum, I made us supper. Eleanor forced herself to smile, hiding the fear that clawed at her chest. She hugged him tightly, holding him longer than usual. That night, as Oliver slept upstairs, Eleanor sat by the window staring into the darkness. Who was the man in the alley? Was he friend or foe? And most of all, what truth lay waiting for her at the old mill? The night was bitterly cold as Eleanor made her way towards the abandoned mill on the outskirts of Canterbury. The building loomed against the moonlit sky, its broken windows like empty eyes staring into the darkness. Every step on the gravel echoed far too loudly, making her nerves prickle. She pushed open the creaking wooden door. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the smell of mold. Shadows clung to the corners, and the silence was broken only by the sound of dripping water. Mrs. Whitcomb, a voice called from the darkness. Eleanor's breath caught. A lantern flared to life, revealing the man she had met in the alley. He looked older now, his face gaunt, his eyes weary. My name is Samuel Harland, he said quietly. Eleanor froze. Her pulse thundered. You're the child. Richard's son. Samuel nodded, his jaw tightening. I never wanted to be found. But someone else does. Beatrice is hunting me, she knows about the will. She wants to use me to take everything from you. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. And what do you want from me? Samuel's eyes softened with something like regret. The truth. I never asked for his money. I only wanted answers. Why he left my mother with nothing. Why he kept me in the shadows. Before Eleanor could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the mill. Harsh, deliberate, growing closer. Samuel stiffened, his hand tightening on the lantern handle. They've followed you, he whispered urgently. We must hide, now. The wooden door slammed shut behind them, and a cold voice cut through the darkness. Well, Eleanor, Beatrice's voice rang out, calm and cruel. You've found him. Just as I knew you would. The courtroom in Canterbury was filled with an icy silence as Isabella took her seat. Every pair of eyes seemed to rest on her, some sympathetic, others curious, all waiting to see how the scandal that had shaken Whitstable would finally end. Across the aisle sat Thomas and Clara, their faces pale, no trace left of the smug confidence they once carried when they thought their deceit was hidden. The barrister laid out the evidence, the forged signatures on bank documents, the recordings of Thomas and Clara discussing how to divide Isabella's savings, and Margaret's testimony that revealed the blackmail scheme had been staged from the very beginning. Each piece struck like a hammer, cracking apart the lies they had woven. Isabella kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart pounding as she heard their voices played aloud. There was Thomas, promising Clara that they would vanish abroad with the money. There was Clara, laughing that Isabella would never suspect her. The betrayal echoed through the room, cutting Isabella deeper than any blade. Yet there was also a quiet strength in her. She had survived their plot, uncovered their scheme, and now, justice was finally catching up with them. When the judge pronounced the sentence, years behind bars for conspiracy and fraud, the gasp from the gallery filled the chamber. Thomas slumped in his chair, his head hanging low, while Clara burst into tears, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. For Isabella, it was not triumph she felt, but release. The weight of their deception no longer chained her down. That evening, with her daughter's hand in hers, Isabella left Whitstable behind. They boarded a small train bound for a coastal town further along the Kent shore, a place where no one knew their names and where the salty wind carried the promise of renewal. The sea stretched endlessly before them, not as a reminder of what had been lost, but of all that still lay ahead. Isabella watched her daughter smile again, truly smile, as the waves crashed against the rocks below. And in that sound, she found her own heart steady once more, ready to begin a life shaped not by betrayal, but by freedom and quiet strength.